Hello everybody, Jordan here, the PH is silent, and in this episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show, we talk about Wizards of the Coast acquiring a Montreal game company to make Dungeons & Dragons video games, supposedly. Lucian gets excited about troop play, and I get excited about kids on bikes. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Saturday Morning D&D Show. My name is Jordan, with a silent PH in the middle, and I am joined always by my wonderful co-host, Sir Lucian, over at Sir Lucian Gaming. Say hello, good morning. How's everybody doing?
Hello, good morning. How's everybody doing?
Fantastic.
I'm so good at that.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Hope everybody's enjoying their November, first weekend of November.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? I don't know if it was specifically this day, but this time last year, we were doing a live show from GameholeCon.
Oh, yeah. Well, you were there.
I was there.
On a phone, and I was home. But yeah, we did do that. That was fun. I believe the WebDM boys, we were chatting with them and things like that. So that's cool.
Yeah. Turning my sound on now so everybody can hear me. There we go. Jordan can hear me, which is the most important.
I can hear. So, and you could be heard on YouTube. So there you go. Wonderful. Welcome everybody. We have a lot to talk about, I think, today. Should be a really good show. Lots of stuff happening, moving parts and all that jazz. We usually start off with news, and we're still waiting for November 19th for things to happen.
It's getting there. We're on November 2nd for those of you looking at your calendars, unless you're probably in Australia, which maybe you're on November 3rd. So we're coming to you from the past. Maybe you get your stuff a day early. But yeah, November 19th is the big day for us. Eberron rising from the last war. All of you that are really ready to play your Warforged and to maybe play some Changeling, or what are some of the other cool races that's coming with that? Artificers coming.
Did you hear they're changing the Warforged, though?
No, what?
I didn't put this in the notes because I just really realized it, but there was something on Reddit where there was an interview with Jeremy Crawford, and he said that they are changing how the Warforged race operates. So right now you pick between like Skirmisher or Juggernaut. Like it has these three subclasses within the race, and they're apparently getting rid of that and making it so it sounds more like the Simic hybrid from the Magic the Gathering Ravnica book. Where at certain levels you get to pick certain aspects of your Warforged and they come into play. So it was kind of interesting, and we were looking at it, and I'm playing a Warforged, so I'm like, oh well, once this book releases, they're going to update all of the Warforged stuff on D&D Beyond, and I think my 23 AC Eldritch Knight Warforged Fighter is going to dip down to like a 17 or 18 AC. But we'll have to see. It kind of felt like a nerf, but I was talking to my dungeon master, and he was like, no, I feel like the Warforged are just really powerful, and maybe they shouldn't have that much free AC, because you add your proficiency bonus to your AC, and so you can get really high. The trade-off is you can't wear armor, like magical armor, so you can't find magical cool stuff and wear it, but it's a really low trade-off. So we'll wait and see. But they did announce that that they are going to, if you bought Wayfinder's Guide to Eberron, they're going to like fix all that or add it so that the latest, once this comes out with all the changes, that will also reflect those changes. So I would encourage everybody who has Wayfinders to download the current PDF now, and then you can have both versions successfully saved, and you could play the old way or you could play the new way. So whatever you want to do.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea too, because the idea that you're maybe picking upgrades for your Warforged, or as you go for certain levels, and then if you do want to go tanky, maybe there's some tanky ones, and if you want to go a different route, maybe there's a different. Because I think with that Simic one, that was what you could pick, like claws, or you could pick like extra eyes, or just whatever weird mutations you wanted that kind of fit what you were doing with that character. And I love those little little itty bitty things that I wish were in all of the races. Really, it'd be cool if that was how all of the races actually work. They had little things that you could pick up to kind of customize yourself.
Well, it's interesting because most races are, you get everything at level 1. You know, you get dark vision, you get all this other stuff. And the Simic one really broke it down, and you got to choose, but it also is like, okay, you don't get water breathing until 3rd or 4th level kind of a thing.
Right.
And I think that's what they're trying to do, because the Warforged just got way too much at 1st level. Like when you select that, you get a lot. Immune to disease and immune to poison damage and things like that. And you have all these resistances. And I think this will make more sense that you're upgrading yourself as you level up, and will probably balance out the race a little bit more. But yeah, we'll see. So,
yeah. Well, and also to maybe help understand that there's not just one type of Warforged, because if you're going to turn it into a player class, you really don't want it to be, well, everybody is this exact same looking suit of armor, and we're all playing that because when the war happened, they created, 10,000 of these suits of armor, and that's now what you're going to play. But there's no real customization there. You're just one of those 10,000 that have been set free. Whereas this feels more like you can be very individual Warforged, and you're not going to look like other Warforged per se. You could look very different from, and it's introducing the idea that there's not just one type of Warforged. There's lots of types of Warforged that maybe were created to fight this war, and that helps kind of reinforce that idea that there's lots of different types.
Yep. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. We're also waiting for Dungeons and Dragons versus Rick and Morty, where Rick is the DM, and so when you play the game, you're encouraged to be Rick running a game, whatever that is. And I'm really curious about this product, just because it is like, no, we're encouraging you to play like these fictional characters on this cartoon. So that will be an interesting game, I think. So
that one's like a niche within a niche there, I think.
For sure.
For that audience. Because I think it'd be tough for, like, I don't know if I have in me to be a Rick DM.
Yeah.
I probably enjoy the show. And I haven't watched a ton of it enough to be able to say, oh yeah, I can run a game just like that. So I wonder how many other people are out there that way too.
Yeah.
So, it'd be cool.
I don't know. It's cool. And it really opens the doors. I feel like we're going to get more of these like Dungeons and Dragons tie-ins in the future. Just because they are popular, and it's doing what Wizards wants to do, which is bridge the gap between other fandoms with their fandom. Same thing they did with really Ravnica. The whole book was like, hey, you like Magic the Gathering, let's bridge the gap into Dungeons and Dragons. And same with the Stranger Things supplement and this and things like that. Like, oh, you like this, you will also maybe like this. And so we'll probably see more of those, even though you're correct in saying that it is a niche within a niche, but it's very targeted. And I think it's smart on their end. But the other bit of news is there is a survey out, a D&D survey that Wizards of the Coast, they want your feedback. And I took the survey. Did you take the survey?
I did. Isn't it funny that all their surveys take somewhere around 20 to 25 minutes? They don't put out small surveys, it seems like. They put out like long. I was laying in bed.
Than I thought it would.
We're just like, okay, you're still asking me questions. You're still asking me questions. What'd you think of the stuff that was on there?
No, I thought it was really good. The push for streaming had a lot of like, do you watch D&D basically? And they had a bunch of shows you could select, but you could also like type in shows that you enjoy. So I ended up like plugging some of the smaller shows that I really enjoy. That I'm like, oh well, Critical Role's fine and all, but like this is really cool too. And so I plugged a couple of those. They really spanned the gamut of questions though. Like it was just like, what classes do you like the most? How often do you play D&D? And even to the point of like, how much D&D video games do you consume and play? Like kind of, a whole bunch of broad questions about their brand as a whole. And it's going to influence their decisions going forward with what type of products to make and how to not, I was going to say how to keep the public like interested and happy, but I guess that really is it. Like but they have a plan. They have like a 5-year, 10-year plan, I'm sure. But it can deviate with whatever data they gather from this. So I would encourage you guys to all go and take that. It's help define where we're going with the Dungeons and Dragons.
I'd love to see the results. I don't think they ever give out that kind of stuff.
Either.
But
yeah,
it'd be nice to really see.
It would be cool to see like how many people are really like wanting new classes, or they're fine with races, or how many hours people actually play D&D a week, you know? Because for us, it's a lot, but this hobby is also kind of our passion and everything else. And so for the average person, it's like, oh no, we play like once a month. And when we get to level 4, we start a new campaign. And it doesn't, you know, and so it's kind of like there are people that play like that, or just do one shots, nothing but one shots, you know, and it's kind of like, oh, yeah. So,
well, they also like there was a whole list of just about everything they've released for 5th edition. Like, did you buy this book? Did you buy this book? Did you buy this one? Did you get it in PDF form?
Fandom? Yeah.
Have you only read it, or have you actually bought it in hardcover? So, like, they're even judging, you know, just hardcover sales versus maybe digital online sales versus, you know, the other stuff. I did see a little bit of clapback a little bit on Twitter about the list of influencers they put on there, and that even some of the shows that are even on their own channel weren't even mentioned.
Yeah.
And there were other ones that people were like, that one's on there, but how did you not get this other one, you know? And I think there's always going to be this, because there's so many shows, how you can't really put them all on there. Yeah. But it was interesting to see the list they chose, because I didn't see Roll20 Presents on there, and that's a pretty big group for them. I mean, that's a pretty big
advertising like they're not playing a custom campaign, they're playing their modules and things like that. Yeah. So I don't know.
Sponsored by them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. So yeah, I would definitely go out and take it. It takes about 20-ish minutes, 25-ish minutes, depending on how long you take to answer those questions. So
yeah,
cool.
And then really the last little bit of news, which I thought was really interesting, is Wizards of the Coast bought a Montreal video game company called TUQUE, and I think it's French.
Touk.
Is it Touk?
I think it's Touk.
Because I was like 2Q. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's Touk.
But I don't even pretend to try and speak French, so I was just like, I'm not really sure. But they bought this, and apparently, like, the rumors is that they have been in contact with this company to make a Dungeons and Dragons game, and now they've gone a step further and just acquired them to only make D&D games going forward. So they're going to use the Forgotten Realms intellectual property and the D&D mechanics, and they're going to have them make video games. And I am really curious about this, because we have Baldur's Gate 3 coming from a studio in Texas, if I'm
Austin,
correct. Yeah. And now we have this Montreal company building other things. So they're branching out, and I think it's smart, you know? Like this is, people can't play Dungeons and Dragons all the time, every day, but they can get their fix through a video game. And so I think a lot of people will be interested in this. Obviously, Baldur's Gate 3, the hype around that game is very large. I think people have been waiting for a third installment of that for a long time. And so, it'll be really interesting. I'm really curious as to what kind of stuff's going to come out of this new game company that they own.
And I think the game they did before that I recognized was called Livelock.
Yeah.
Or Livelock, I guess, depending on how you choose. And it was kind of a top-down isometric 4-player co-op-ish game, as I recall. So I wonder if they're staying in that vein of types of games, or if they're going to have them build mobile games, or if they're going to have them build.
Oh, I didn't think about mobile games.
What type of game are they even going to build? MMOs, RPGs, quick phone type games, Candy Crush or something like that? Is it going to be, because we already have things like several on Steam. Why is it slipping my mind? We love to play it. I'm bringing up Steam as I'm trying to stall for time. Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms. Right. I mean, that's kind of that you get into
casual
it for
game,
20 minutes or a minute, or you can spend any time you want. It plays offline type thing, and they have all those cool characters in it. So are they going that route, or
from what I've told, it's a AAA studio. Like, they're going to make big games, and whether that's for console or PC or both, I don't think it's going to be little mobile game things.
Or we going to get like a Witcher. style game in D&D world? Could it be like Forgotten Realms, but as done by, like Grand Theft Auto style or Red Dead Redemption 2 style or something?
Yeah, no, for sure. And
interesting.
Time will tell. So I don't know. I'm really curious. I'm looking forward to more information about that. We'll just have to wait and see, right? It literally just happened on Halloween. I think they announced that they are purchasing that. But like I said earlier, the rumor is that they've been working on a D&D title for a little bit. So maybe the new year or around Christmas or something, we'll hear some information about a new video game. And I don't even know when Baldur's Gate 3 is supposed to come out, actually. If that has a release date or not, but it's on my Steam wish list, so I'll get notified, I'm sure.
Yeah, they gave us a video preview or
no gameplay.
Cinema.
It was just a cinematic, So,
but no date attached to it, or not even a year. I don't even think they said like coming in 2020 or anything like that. So we'll see. But they tied in this last module, so you would feel like maybe it was close, but I don't know. They're still doing a lot of hiring for that studio also. I noticed on their website, a lot of the job openings for Wizards of the Coast are geared towards that at the moment.
Okay.
So very cool.
Yeah.
That kind of leads us into, wasn't a lot of news. We're at the end of the year. I think everything's winding up. I think the big thing, the push that's going on at the moment is they're doing their charity stuff. And people are at Gamehole Con this weekend. There's PAX Unplugged is coming up, so that'll be another
is that December?
Big push.
The beginning of December?
Yeah.
I really wanted to go. I have so many friends going, and they were just like, "Go, Jordan, go!" And I'm like, "A baby, I can't."
Fly to Philly.
But, it'd be so much fun.
It was fun last year. It was kind of cool.
Well, I don't know. It's like Gen Con is an excuse to go hang out with all of my internet friends, it feels like. And so if I could get that like, twice a year, that would be awesome to go to, Gen Con and then go to PAX Unplugged, because it seems like the same people go to those. But it's just not in the cards this year. So send me photos.
No, you want to save it up because you want to do the D&D live event next year.
I do, actually. I do want to try that out. That would be a lot of fun.
So moving on to that's about our news. So if you guys had seen anything that we missed, definitely go ahead and post in the comments or post in chat. We'll definitely get caught up. On the Discord, a lot of people joined our Discord and they do a good job of pointing out things that are happening. Usually me and Jordan are pretty on top of it, but we always get help having you people snooping out the other stuff that's going on in the
I disagree.
Netverse.
I don't think Jordan is on top of it at all, but that is 100% me not on top of things. So,
in our next segment, which we've been calling in our notes, I have it written down as Bardic Inspiration, but I did notice on the Discord channel that so there was a few more suggestions, like Appendix D was pretty good. I like that one, or Awarding Inspiration. But all of it was a way to, and not to go into detail, but just an inspirational thought for a campaign, one shot, or adventure that you might have. And I had a couple over the week. I noticed something must have triggered your imagination this week, because in our notes we actually had one from Jordan for the first time.
We'll try. Trying something new, guys. I'm going to contribute to my own podcast. That's what's going to happen.
Well, I'll do one of mine, and then you can do yours. And then if we feel like we haven't taken up too much time, I'll do my second one. But so I was a big fan of the card game Keyforge, which was made by Richard Garriott, who made Magic the Gathering. So it all kinds of ties back into Wizards of the Coast, which is cool. And the unique thing about Keyforge, this new deck building game that he created, is that every single deck that they sell is a unique deck. So they've created this algorithm that builds trillions of combinations, or I don't know what the actual number is. Then it goes through and it creates all these cards, puts them in decks, and then they ship them out. And every time you buy a deck, it's completely unique, right? So in its combination. Now, there may be some cards that are similar, but no deck is the same. And you take that deck and you go and you play a game, right? So nice and fun. There's a big community growing upon it. There's a lot of tournament stuff going on. What it made me think about was, I wonder if you could create a system, and you would probably need to do it with random tables, which, tabletop RPGs are always big about random tables. That's one of the favorite things you can see in a lot of books, especially OSR books.
Yeah.
Could you create completely unique characters every single time by having a big enough random character generator with skills, abilities, and things that you would
Magic
randomly
items.
generate, and it would create a playable class that's completely unique to you, and probably nobody else has ever rolled that because the possibilities are so big, right? I would think. Or maybe you'd have to do it in a computer program because the size of the tables, you wouldn't want to be flipping through pages and say, okay, I rolled 6,754. Let me flip to that page. But in a computer, you would be able to do it easily where it's all in the background, and you would just have it, you know, randomly go through things. And the cool thing about Keyforge, it's not just about random. The computer AI that they built for this game behind the scenes also goes through and makes sure that the deck is viable. So it doesn't just build something that's not going to work at all. It knows that there's, of these trillions of combinations, there's these ones that are all viable and will play by the rules and should play fairly well. Doesn't mean it'll beat every deck out there or be great, but it is viable enough to play. And I wonder if you could create a character generator that would be like that. And then every time you sat down with your friends and you went through and maybe used like a D&D online kind of thing or D&D Beyond kind of thing, we would all have unique characters for every play session that or every new campaign. So I was always wondering. I was wondering if you thought that was interesting, or if you had any ideas for how we could replicate or simulate a little bit of that.
Well, so D&D Beyond has like build me a character. Like it's got like a quick character builder button when you start a new character. So it kind of has that already, but I almost feel like you would need more
big lists.
Like,
yeah,
well,
you would need
like
big
more
lists.
classes, more things like that.
Well, I think you'd want to get away from classes, and you'd want to get to, these are skills and abilities, and there's thousands of them. And it gives you a combination of skills and abilities, and then you decide what that is. Like, you're like, oh, I'm looking at all this. Guess what? I'm a gunslinger. This is like being a gunslinger, and you just call it whatever you want to call it. But
so you're not really like a wizard monk. You're like, I can cast divine spells, and I can also hit things with my fists. Or like, I've got... I don't know, like warlock powers over here, and like, I don't know. You can you're talking about mix and matching all of those things. Sounds like it could be very overpowered, but you could also be very underpowered too. So
who knows? But if it's a team game, and you're just making a character that's going to go with 4 other people, and if you look at it from like an RP stance, for those of us that love to build characters, sometimes it's fun to have something put in front of you, and you have to decide, well, what is this? What is the feel of this character? You know, what this is the ability I got. I can Misty Step. I can call a Shadow Blade. And the last ability it gave me was like a heal of some sort. And I might look at that and go, man, what am I? Am I a Twilight Cleric? Am I some type of, you could really come up with your own idea then based on what you think those abilities they gave you were. So I think that just another creative way to do it. But you would definitely, I think, need a big list of abilities to accomplish. So.
So after Gen Con, and I was talking to some friends, and they were like, I kind of want to like build a game. I got really inspired, and I'm like, I want to like design a game. And excuse me, cough. I had a similar idea where I'm like, I don't necessarily want there to be a necromancer class, but if you chose necrotic energy and spell casting, and you kind of put that together, and so I wanted these compartmentalized parts where I could put, like, I want to have a sword and divine magic, and that's why I'm going to be a paladin. Or I want to have like radiant magic and a spell casting thing, and that's how I'm a cleric. And you kind of like mix and match. And so it's like, I want to have a pet, but I also want, divine magic, and I want like spell things. And so I'm going to summon elementals or something, and really leave it up to the players and the DM to imagine what that is. And so it's kind of similar to what you were talking about.
That sounds like right on the nose.
And I made a whole bunch, and I had a couple of friends read through it. I should revisit that. Like all of the projects I start, I get about, I don't know, a fourth of the way through it, and I get like, oh, something shiny, and I I run over there and I don't finish things, but yeah. Cool.
That's my superhero power, starting things, and then my greatest weakness is finishing anything. So yeah, I'm with you. So that was my bardic inspiration. You guys can take that and run with it, or you can comment on it, take it to the YouTube comments at some point after the video has been posted and tell us what you think or some ideas you have about it, or if it generates another idea for you. But what about you, Jordan? What kind of inspiration did you have this week?
So this is, I'm like looking at this and I'm just like, this is dumb, but we're going to talk about it anyway.
Why not?
For some reason, we were talking about the movie Inner Space at work, where and I haven't seen it since I was like 12 or something, but like the hero gets shrunk down and accidentally injected. He's supposed to go into a rabbit, I think, but they accidentally inject him into another human being. And he's flying his little like spaceship through the human body, trying to figure out where he is and whatever. And so this idea of like shrinking down and then he's inside the human body, and that's Inner Space. That's the whole movie, if I'm remembering correctly. I probably am not, because I was 12 and I'm now 37. And it got me thinking of like, that would, you know, there's been like, oh, you got, I don't know, this is kind of tropey, but like there's been things where you got you got swallowed by a giant snake, and then the dungeon that the dungeon master lays out for you is you trying to get out of the snake, or you're in its digestive tract or something like that. And so I had this like interesting idea of like, what if there was a magical, because of Inner Space, what if there was a magical disease that you had to shrink your players down, inject them into this sick person, and then they literally had to like go through the body and fight off this magical disease, like hand-to-hand combat kind of a thing. And then, you know, cut off the cancer at the head and kill it and free the person of this magical problem. And so that was kind of the idea. And I was like, that could be a whole campaign. That could be a one shot. That could be part of your existing campaign. But I really like the idea of like, we have to save this person by magically shrinking ourselves down, and then all of the perils that is like your circulatory system and antibodies attacking you, and you have to figure out all this other stuff. And not only are you battling the disease, but you're battling the immune system. And I don't know, it was kind of interesting. So yeah, that's where I was going. But why were we talking about Inner Space? I don't even remember. It's just kind of like,
that's good, like, though. I like the idea that when you said Inner Space and then shrinking down, I immediately jumped to, oh, this is going to be a campaign. If I was running it about fighting slimes and molds, and they were small and they're inside the body and it's taking over the cells. So you're going to go in and beat the little piece that keeps interacting and killing off or taking over things. And if you could just kill that little piece of thing, it would stop. But the only way to get to it is to get really small, because no healing spell is fixing it. No, no magic, no restoration seems to stop it, because it's a living creature that is somehow oozed into this person in some way. So you're dealing with like black puddings and amoeba sites and, but they're all just shrunk down. So I think that's really cool. That's where my brain started to go, is like all this amorphous kind of creature stuff that you'd be fighting. I think it'd be fun. No, and even taking it a step further, like the lore, like Zagutmoy, the abyssal demon, like maybe she infected somebody with like essence of Zagutmoy, and it's literally like, populating in this thing, and you need to go into this guy's body to destroy that, because no regenerative magic is going to work. Like every time they cure him, it comes back like hours later, because you're getting rid of all the mold and fungus in their body, but that little piece of Zagutmoy that won't go away, and you have to extract that somehow. And so it would be interesting to be like, well, no, we'll shrink down, and then all of your magic is shrunk down, and there's just fireballs going off in somebody's lungs, and I don't know, like it could be cool. A lot of fun. That could be an interesting dungeon, in a non-traditional sense, I guess. So it's been done before. I've heard lots of people talk about like, an organism as a dungeon, but I think that would be a lot of fun. And you have a clear objective too, which is really good. Like I like it when it's like, okay, we don't necessarily know what we're going to find in here, but like we know that we have to go and cut the head off the snake. Like I got to do this. And I like that you just have a clear objective and you have to get there somehow, which then turns into a really good
5 or 6 session of D&D, or like a really awesome one shot, and you can make it as long and as complicated as you want to. So
yeah, or you could even take it the more mythological route too, and not even that more of a science thought of it, where it's kind of like a pseudoscience. You're thinking about like the pop culture movies, but you could go back to mythology and think you could play a whole game where your players have been stuck in a Leviathan or the whale, and it's moving around in the ocean. They've been swallowed and they're trying to get out physically from something that's enormous around them. So it's even that telling the story of, of escaping something that swallowed you whole. A Tarrasque has swallowed you whole, or whatever it might be, some giant moving creature. I think in Acquisitions Inc., in the very first season for C Team, they were talking about that moving dungeon that they would get stuck into, and they would move around the world and stuff. I always like that idea of that living tomb dungeon that moved. And you're in it, you've got to get out before wherever it's going to pop up next. So another way to take it. So very cool. I liked it.
YouTube, they're just like, Jordan, Fantastic Voyage, Osmosis Jones, Rick and Morty, the Magic School Bus. This is like a trope that's been done a whole bunch. So like 100%, like, it's
there's lots of places
to find this, but for some reason Inner Space came to mind. So
yeah. The last one I had was an interesting one. I had not played a role-playing game that did this, but I was watching Adam Coble do his office hours. And that's where people send in questions and they ask about running games and mechanics and things like that. And he talked about troop play. And I had not heard of troop play as a thing, whereas apparently in like the role-playing game Ars Magica, when you sit down, you create, say, 10 characters that are going to be a part of the campaign. And then you decide who's going to be DM for a session. And if I'm going to run it, then the other players then pick from those 10, well, what is the story going to focus on for this session? And it might focus on the wizard and this person. Each person can just pick, but they're not really your character. It's like the group's character, and you can switch. And then like the next week, Jordan's the DM. So maybe I pick the paladin this time, and then the other player's like, well, all right, we're going to pick this person and this person, and they're going to go on that adventure. And you have this troop of different players to choose from session to session to session. So a very kind of a different way than we're used to taking a look at our characters. And in some ways, you might think your brain might be going right to OSR for a second, because you might be, well, like in there, I have them create 3 or 4 characters, and then whichever ones live, they get to be first level and they move on. That's kind of a style of troop. But I was also thinking, like, what if you created like 10 mercenaries or 10 members of the gang of New York, or 10 whatever it was, 10 crew members on a ship, right? And then when the DM decides, okay, for this episode, we're doing an away mission on a planet, the people say, oh, okay, well, I'm going to pick this security officer because they probably go on an away mission. And the other person's like, okay, well, I'm going to play our doctor that we created. And the other person's like, well, I'll just bring in our communications expert because that's cool. And then the next time we have a session, we decide what's going on. We're like, oh, we're going to do something cool. We're going to do some type of ship combat, or we're going to do some type of, we're going to be on a space station. We're on a diplomatic mission or whatever. I'm thinking Star Trek for some reason. But I just thought this idea of troop play and at the end, those characters advance. So we all talk about how we think those characters would advance. So now it becomes all of us building personality and nuances into these characters together. And it's not just my character and I'm only making the decision on, well, I want to play my character like they're a little bit afraid. Maybe they have a lisp. Maybe they stutter sometimes. But I definitely want him to go down this paladin route, and he's going to be really, really this and that. It's like all these decisions I'm making for my character, which is cool. But I also like the idea of this collaborative, hey, we have the captain of the company. What do we all think the captain should be like? What do we think are the things that make this person's personality stand out? And we're like, yeah. And what kind of thing would he do now that he's more powerful and he's learned more? He's better at doing, or she is doing it what she's able to do. And we're like, oh, she would definitely be better at mounted combat. So she took some cool mounted combat stuff, or, you could just go a whole bunch of different ways. So I'd never seen troop play. And I was thinking it would be very cool to see a troop play version of Dungeons and Dragons. So if anybody out there have played games that have troop play mechanics, the only one I've heard of, I'm sure there are more, is called Ars Magica, and it's not one I played. I'm definitely going to go look at it, because that made me interested to say, wait a minute, there's a style of RPG out there I haven't tried out yet. Hold on, I need to go check this out. So that was the other one I wanted to throw out there, is this idea of troop play with the characters.
Yeah, so I really like the Star Trek reference. Makes me think of how it would work in most scenarios, because you are just like, hey, we reached here, we're going to do an away mission. Who are we going to take? And you have this pool of characters that you can, move and utilize, which is kind of interesting. It made me think of I don't know if it's a world building tool or an actual game, but it's called Microscope. And you start very big with creating a world, and then you zoom in, which is why it's called Microscope, to a very small scene to kind of establish the inner workings of that. And it made me think of that, because when you're collaborating and building this world, during those zoom in moments, everyone kind of picks up a certain character, or they all pick different characters, and then they interact with a small little scene to establish what that large world on a small scale kind of works like. So I wonder if you could incorporate that into your games as well, doing something. But I don't know. Now I just think we should have a Spelljammer game with a dozen characters on ship, and they're like, we're at a weird planet. I don't know. Let's take the bard and the fighter and this. And they're like, well, there's a lot of slimes. All right, we'll take the magic user too. And so could be a lot of fun. And
I think anything where you definitely have a troop, like right now, Matt Colville's game called The Chain, the Chain of Akron is a mercenary group, and all the players have a main character, but they all have a bunch of underlings that hire under them, and they can do things. And when Adam was explaining it, it'd be very cool, because we could say, okay, if I'm the DM and I'm going to run, the main session is going to focus on Jordan's character. So maybe you could even have a main character, but then the rest of us players would play a subordinate of your character for a session, because we're going to do something on your storyline. And then we run that for a little bit, a small arc or a one shot or maybe a couple of sessions. And that arc wraps up. And then we say, okay, that's cool. Now we want to focus on our lieutenant, and he has some underlings, or she has some underlings under him. And then you would go, okay, well, now I'm going to play the drummer, the bard, who's our battle standard, and I'm going to play our medic, and I'm going to play this, and they're all sub characters that aren't necessarily the main characters. Yeah. And one of the things that Adam had mentioned that would be interesting about this, not just the idea that we're playing different characters but it's the idea that when somebody plays, one time I play Jordan's subordinate, who happens to be the standard holder, and I played a certain way, but it would be cool to see how somebody else would play that character too. So you get this really kind of evolving different look at these characters, and you can almost think of it as a narrative difference, as if different authors were writing that character. You would get a little bit different look at them, a little bit of more insight into that character. So I just thought it'd be cool. It was a really interesting thing, something I hadn't done, and maybe challenging to those of us that like to dive into our characters or be handed something. And because a lot of us, we could take a random character or a pre-made, and we could put some realness into it. We could put some personality into it, even though we're handed a pre-made that we didn't create. So sometimes getting away from, this is the character I created from the beginning and the one I wanted, versus hand me something and let me see what I could make of it. Yeah. So that's what I liked about it. So
yeah, that's cool.
If you guys like it, let us know in the comments if you have some ideas on how you could make it work. I know, like it was mentioned in the chat there, D&D is not meant for that style of gameplay. But that doesn't mean we can't find ways to make it work. We do. I mean, I've done Wes March's style game in Dungeons and Dragons. It's not necessarily built for that. We've done all kinds of different games using the D&D rules that aren't necessarily built the way they were used. So it'd be cool to see. So that was it for our Bardic Inspiration or Appendix D or Inspiration for campaigns. I don't know. Hopefully
now
that gives you guys something.
I want to get a tattoo where my appendix is and put like a D on there. Like a little like dotted line where it is and then a D in the middle. They're like, why do you have such a weird tattoo? And I'm like, it's an inside joke on a really cool D&D podcast.
Yeah. And it's watch it on Saturday mornings. It's really cool. All right. So
anyway.
Yeah. Other than that, we then jump into what we've done for the week. I think I started off last week. I'll let Jordan go again. He sounded like he had a really fun week of Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing stuff. What did you get to do?
It was Halloween. So we played a Halloween Kids on Bikes game. Anybody who is, a friend of the show, obviously you've been watching, hear me gush about Kids on Bikes a whole bunch. Last year, I ran it for the first time on Halloween or around Halloween in October, and we recorded the session, and it was a Halloween game where everybody was getting dared on Halloween night to go into this house, and then it turned out to be like a weird haunted house, and they had to figure out what it was. So I wanted to keep with that theme, but I wasn't entirely sure what to do. So I did a couple of live streams and used like collective data from everybody to kind of build a game together, which was really fun. So you can go back there on my channel. You can watch these live streams if you want to, where we're hammering out the ideas for this Kids on Bikes game that we did now. And now that I've done it 2 years in a row, I really want it to be a Halloween tradition because it's such a like, and I'll preface this, like I feel bad saying this because I've had a lot of fun with D&D, but it was probably the most fun I've had in a role-playing game ever. Like everybody was just really invested in their characters. We had fun. The action was nonstop. My wife, who generally doesn't enjoy Dungeons and Dragons or role-playing games not nearly as much as I do, she was like, that was really fun, and like had just a blast with her character and everything else. So it was just encouraging to see everybody at the table like really enjoying and really having an investment in it, and so it was a lot of fun. But this year we went trick-or-treating. Everybody was like a teenager. I think we had one girl that was young as 10. These are characters that they made. And then I think the oldest was 17. And they all kind of like met up and they found a poor crying girl that had lost her candy. And the entire adventure kind of went from there, where they had to like go from door to door trying to find this little girl's candy who was dressed like a witch. Really fun. Part of the enjoyment I have of Kids on Bikes is that we get to create the world a little bit. So we get to establish like what town do you want to be in? What's the town famous for? Why are you in this town? Where did you move from? Have you always been a resident? And so just those general questions kind of create this fun world that everybody is invested in because we've all contributed a little bit to it. So really fun. We recorded it, and it is live on the Saturday Morning D&D Show YouTube channel right now. So if you want some Halloween fun, you can listen to our game of Kids on Bikes. And I think I have the other one, last year's, linked as well. And I'll put them in the show notes for this episode if you guys are interested. But I'd love to hear your feedback and see what you guys thought of our game, because that would be a lot of fun to see if you guys enjoyed it. And if you'd like us to do more of those, I guess. I did a poll on Twitter and a couple of other places where people were like, no, we want to see you like play some more games and record some more games. So I will try and do that.
Yeah, Kids on Bikes and Tales from the Loop have that thing that is so cool that lets people tie back into their own childhood or reconnect with that preteen moving into teenager self, and lets them dive back into those weird things that we all went through for our lives, not fitting in somewhere, or we were part of the jock group or the geek group, or that we were the emo group, or whatever it was, and it ties us back to those 80s and 90s, or depending on when you grew up and what was your time slot. So you get to go back to that, and you get to play out those tropes a little bit, but then put little twists on them because you're an adult now and you kind of understand more than you did back then. but it's also fun to go back to that. And just that idea of that small town adventure of kids riding around on bikes, stumbling upon something supernatural or spooky or whatever, and just doing something with it. And I've always found it, D&D has that great fantasy element where you get to feel like you can be a hero, and that's what it ties you into. You feel like you're the knight in shining armor, or you're the wizard throwing great big spells, or you're the druid that is really in tune with nature. Really cool fantasy tie-in that tugs at your heart. But those games, Kids on Bike and Tales from the Loop, tug at your little kid heart, that I used to be that 10-year-old. I used to, and I loved my cassette player, and I would always listen to this music. And sometimes I got bullied a little bit because the other kids would push you around and take my lunch money. And, but then we found the secret, the weird spooky house that nobody would go in.
Yeah.
I mean, that just ties into realness, like stuff you've lived versus this dream or fantasy that you have. So it hits a different need or scratches a different itch, but it's so good and people love it after they've done it. Everybody I've played in those games have absolutely loved those sessions. They're able to tie into something that they maybe feel like they've lost or they haven't tied into before, and it brings it all back. So it's really cool.
It's almost the same thing as you were saying, D&D makes you feel like a hero. Like a lot of these games, like when you are that 12 or 13-year-old kid, you do kind of feel invincible. Like you're cautious, but at the same time, you have no real reason to think that you couldn't take down a tentacle monster that's living in the lake nearby. And you come up with some elaborate weird plan where you're going to drop a power line into the lake and electrocute it and see what happens. And I love stuff like that. And just the creativity is really things, and so, or really just comes out, and it's really fun. So yeah, I don't know. That game has a special place in my heart. I have yet to play Tales from the Loop. I bought it. But I'll be honest, I always find myself sitting down to play or to organize like a Tales from the Loop game. And then I'm like, why don't we just play Kids on Bikes? Cause I'm more familiar with that and I'm really good. And it would just be fun. And so,
they're really similar. They're super similar.
Different dice and different mechanics, but it's kind of, they are similar. It's fun though.
Yeah.
So, and then my other game was Ghosts of Saltmarsh. I'm doing a bunch of like mini quests so that they can level up to level 7. They're level 6 right now. So they're kind of running around doing mini quests, and it's been really fun because I don't mean to purposely trick them, but they're very like, oh, you want us to go on this adventure? Sure. And I'm like, all right. Like they want to go, like no questions asked. They're going as long as they get a reward, kind of a thing. And it was after this last session that they were told by a group of Tritons that there was a hag in a forest that was polluting the ocean with weird magical reagents. And so they went into the forest to take care of this hag. And the hag was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you here invading my home? And the paladin was like, well, it's a fiendish hag. And the paladin's just like, those need to be taken care of. It's clearly evil. And so they took care of it, but it was afterwards that they were all talking. They're like, I think we were duped, guys. And so I'm curious where they're going to take this information. Every session has been, it's been interesting like that, where we're really building up kind of the world and their place in it. And they're learning that maybe they're not like, being
we're used. Not the good guys.
Well, yeah, they're not being used by the good guys. So the things that they're doing aren't necessarily like, oh, maybe we need to reevaluate this, and try to figure out whose side we're actually on. A fun twist and everything is I mentioned that they had captured this follower of Lolth, this evil druid, and they invited him back into their bar that they now own and are running this bar. Well, he ended up taking a couple of patrons and, spinning them up in cocoons. And so they came back and they're just like, no, I've got these people. Like, we're going to sacrifice him to Lolth. And they're just like, you can't do that. So they took care of him. They ended up, killing him basically. But the artificer was so like mesmerized by this that he has decided to take one level in wizard, and he's now a wizard, a follower of Lolth. So we're getting some real conflicting characters at this point, especially with the paladin and the rest of them, because they're just kind of like, I don't know, like I follow Lolth now, she's evil but she's cool. And so it's been a fun game. We're playing that on Wednesday, so we'll see what happens there. And I've got Acquisitions Incorporated later today, should be a lot of fun. Yeah, my Halloween I spent watching horror movies and handing out candy to no kids that showed up at my door, so now I've got a huge thing of candy. But what did you do, Mr. Lucian, in games?
Yeah, so sticking with the Halloween theme there, on Thursday night, a friend of mine, for his neighborhood, he lives in a nice big subdivision, so there's lots of kids moving around because there's no busy streets and that, just houses and houses and houses. And he turns his whole garage and part of his backyard into his own little version of a little haunted house thing, and he puts a lot of work into it. He has a bunch of his friends come over and volunteer to help out. So I went over there, and all of a sudden we get the first snow kind of storm of the year. It's sleeting, it's snowing, the wind is blowing and gusting up to 20 miles an hour. But there are kids everywhere in costumes and coats still, because they want to get their candy. So, so it was really fun to do that. A little bit probably why my voice is way, because I was at the front of the door getting them all ready. So it's like, we have a big thing of rules, and they're, don't run, don't push on things, don't worry about, nothing's going to touch you. You won't have to touch nothing. And just have all this fun and get some candy. But you're saying that over and over and over to all these really hyper excited kids in costumes. So it was really fun to do that. I froze my butt off, and it was a pretty good night. But here at my house, there was no kids showed up because nobody wanted to get out in the snow. So it's funny. I grew up in Arizona for all of my trick-or-treating days, which means we were all in short sleeves and shirts or whatever costumes we had, because it's probably 80 degrees still over there. And you would go from, you would just leave as soon as the sun went down, and you would just roam neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood in that big, sprawling, spread out city of Phoenix. There's a lot of places to go get candy. So it's very different to be up in the Northwest and what trick-or-treating is versus what out West and the Southern West of trick-or-treating is. But so it's cool. Apparently the most popular costume, can you guess what the most popular costume was this year?
Captain Marvel. You
would think. Nope, it was a bunch of Fortnite characters.
Oh.
So everybody was dressed as a Fortnite character that I could see. So that apparently is big with the kids these days. So that was pretty funny.
Kids love their Fortnite.
Yeah. So other than that, Dungeons and Dragons wise, I rescheduled Monday night. We had one person that was not going to be able to make it. And this coming Monday, I also had to reschedule because I got a big appointment on Tuesday morning. So I didn't want to have to stay up too late. So we're going to have a 2-week break. So last week and this week, we'll pick back up the following week, which if I look at the calendar, I probably should add it up, is probably going to be the 11th. Will be the next time we play Seeking Revenor. And we'll get back to that group and campaign where we've added a few. We're up to 5 players now. And it's West Marches. We're using the Strongholds and Followers book in that. They have a keep, they have followers, and they have a stronghold. And we're doing a lot of that cool stuff. So if you want to see any of that, definitely check that out. But I did get to play Tomb of Annihilation on Wednesday. And we finally walked into the room where when we triggered what was going to happen, I'm trying not to do any spoilers for any of you that might not have played it yet, but it definitely is one of those rooms you walk into as a player sitting back as somebody who's played a lot of Dungeons & Dragons games, and you go, oh, we might have just made a bad move here. The thing we have to deal with is way tougher than we are. And it has the advantage on us. It got the jump on us. It's got some environmental effects that's making it harder for us to deal with it at the moment. And if we can't wrap our heads around how to deal with it and get around some of these problems of getting our abilities to really fire off, we could be in trouble. So this Wednesday coming up could be the end of our party, or we're going to pull out a triumphant battle, which is going to be pretty cool. So it's pretty cool to say, if we all die, it's a really fun group. I think we're will be sad because we all like our characters, but we're also the type of group that's already like, oh, well, I'm already thinking of the next character I want to play. It's like, ooh, I'm going to bring in this character. And it's going to do this kind of thing. And we'll have to see how that goes. But maybe we'll pull it off. Maybe we can get our teamwork together and we can get our spells to fire off and our abilities to work and get some good dice rolls. And maybe we'll pull it out. But it's going to be tough. It's I think we all hit level 9 just before we entered the room. We're at full on health, and we were at like full abilities. So you would think that anything we ran into shouldn't be too bad. But it's definitely, I think the CR rating on this thing that we're having to deal with is maybe 13 or 14 for a group that's a 9. Could be interesting. So we'll have to see how that works out. But Tomb Annihilation, if you haven't got in a campaign of Tomb Annihilation to play, get in it, because of all the campaigns that are out there, it's really a fun one to play through. It has all the elements of Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's the perfect 5e adventure to play. Or if you're only going to get to play one, then play that one. If you're going to get to play them all, then it doesn't matter, play them in any order you want. And it's cool that you get to play them all. But if you get to play one and you're not going to get to play any others, get in a Tomb of Annihilation game, because I don't think you'll be disappointed. So that's our Wednesday night game, which was really fun. One of the things I think too for that is it happened in my game the previous Monday, and it's happening in this right now, is the anti-magic fields. Wow, do they shut some character abilities down? Like they can really give some fits to your warlocks and your wizards and your clerics, depending on if you define divine magic as part of that. Like we were talking about this a little bit last Saturday. Like, would you, for a paladin, do you consider their smites to be affected by an anti-magic field? Do you consider their turning undead to be affected by an anti-magic field? Or are you just doing spells? Or it's affecting magic items? Is it affecting other magical abilities? Like a druid who wants to shift, does an anti-magic field stop them from shifting? So you get into all these cool things that you're having to decide in your world as a dungeon master. How do I want my world to work? You can go on and see how Jeremy's kind of helped with that. They've talked about it quite a bit in Twitter, because there's a lot of ideas about how does this field interact with things that are already existing. Does it affect a breath weapon? Does it affect, all this other stuff? And so it's a really big wrench to throw at your party if you haven't done it yet. So it's kind of cool. Have you tried to throw an anti-magic field at any of your parties?
I haven't. And I'll say, apologies, the YouTube stream, I'm losing all kinds of frames and I'm not really sure what's going on.
I think I did too.
So I apologize for that, but I'll upload this later and things like that. But I haven't used an anti-magic field other than I've used a couple beholders with their anti-magic cone. And if I remember, the first time I did a beholder, we kind of glossed over the fact that it had that because I didn't really know what to do with it. And the second time I did a lot of we really positioned the cone correctly. And it was like, oh, you cast a fireball, half the fireball goes away because he was staring at you, and the rest zoobs over his head and doesn't do things. So, so anyway, it's, I haven't used a lot of it. So.
Yeah, I had one that was centered on a guardian of an artifact, of an ancient artifact. And there was basically a 15-foot bubble that wherever he moved, the anti-magic field moved around with him, and it was a sphere. So you really had to go in after him. You couldn't, the spells would hit that 15-foot mark and then just dissolve and fizzle away. And it really gave our players some fits. Now they have, pretty good melee characters. The thing that helped them is it doesn't fly. But when you mention a beholder, that flies. So now you have that problem too then. But at least it's a cone for the beholder and not an actual full-on bubble. Because that'd be crazy too. But if you haven't done that as a dungeon master in your games yet, and you feel like your players are getting a little uppity, they feel like they're really powerful, every now and then throw an anti-magic field at them and see how they feel. Definitely, they were shocked when it happens. They were scrambling because all their normal plans don't work, right? They have to come up with totally different strategies that they've never come up with before, because they've never had to not deal with, wait a minute, my Eldritch Blast doesn't work at all. Wait, what's going on? So it was pretty fun. So that was pretty cool. We don't have anything else going on for this weekend as far as role playing on my part, but I'm excited for next week. We'll get into Wednesday's game, and then I might try to run something because I won't run it on Monday. I'm pushing to maybe do something on maybe a Thursday or a Friday. It's just I want to role play, but I don't know if it'll be in the campaign or if it'll be a one shot, if it'll be a D&D game or if it'll be a something else game. But I feel like I'm definitely next Friday going to do something fun. So keep an eye out on the Twitter there if I post something out. And if you're free on a Friday night, for those of you that have got to play in my games, maybe let me know on Discord that you got a free Friday night if you do, and maybe I'll throw something together that could be fun for people to play. So
cool.
But that's about all I had for my week. It was a fun week, and I'm excited to get into the winter of role playing because we're finally here. There's snow outside, so
that's crazy.
So,
all right,
that's it for me. Take us out.
Anything else we need to talk about before we leave? No.
I think that's it. Yeah, sorry I had some drop frames too, but you never know how the internet's going to react.
Yeah, I'm dropping all kinds of things, so I'll upload this to YouTube later, and you can always check it Monday on the podcast in MP3 format. But yeah, I don't know. I'll have to diagnose my computer because it was fine earlier. But thanks again for watching, everybody. Thank you for liking, sharing the show with other friends, and commenting and all the cool things. We really appreciate all of your love and support. We will see you next week with another episode of the Saturday Morning D&D Show, unless I have a baby. We'll see. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.